Hello, my name is Kristen, and I am obsessed with all things play-based and child-led learning. Truly obsessed. I am here to help you navigate the messy and the magical on your journey to a play-based program. It is truly magical on the other side, and I want you to feel each day what I feel when I walk into my classroom. I am the homeschool mama to 4. I'm the founder of a play and nature-based preschool and forest school, and I am here to cheer you on. I'm ready. Are you ready? Let's get going. Hello, everybody. I am here today with Laura from Little Stories That Stick. And I think that's your name on Instagram, correct?
It is.
So Laura from Little Stories That Stick, I want you to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell everybody what you do.
All right. So my name is Laura, and I usually go by Miss Shea in the classroom. I have been a early childhood teacher for about 15 years, and a lot of my experience has been in Reggio and making learning visible and using play to help kids learn. And through my career, I was introduced to storytelling and story acting by one of my mentors. And it's a way of building language and closeness between adults that was pioneered by Vivian Paley.
Okay.
And she's written like 15 books maybe. And she actually, she was just a woman that was ahead of her time. It's like she was writing about structural racism and, you say you can't play and all these things like in the 80s.
Okay.
And she actually got the Miss Genius grant, the MacArthur Genius Grant, which she's like one of the only educators that has gotten that.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yes. So she is like,
boss lady?
Yes, like literally. And I met her when she was like 80 something, like old. And she presented at our conference and she came and she was still like mentoring teachers, like
wow,
about her style and everything. So I really just fell in love with everything that she had to offer in a way that could be captured in a classroom in maybe 10 minutes. And I saw the power of it. And I really started to embrace that. And that brought me to Little Stories That Stick, because I started to realize when I moved districts recently, many educators don't know about this. I thought it was like, I thought it was something that people knew. Like a lot of people knew because everybody in Boston, where I was, it was like part of our curriculum in kindergarten and UK. So I was like, well, this needs to be out there more. And that's what brought me there. So I started slowly rolling some stuff out, and with your little nudge, started putting my own stories up as well, because I tell stories every day.
Yes.
And I started posting them on TikTok as well. So you can find me there. And yeah.
Is your TikTok name the same as your Instagram name?
So it's Little Stories That Stick for both. The TikTok, it as just a K in stick, not CK. I think there was a minimum of letters maximum.
That's funny.
Yeah. And there are dots in between each word. So it's like little dot stories dot that dot stick.
So I actually watch your stories because like I get captivated during them. So I know that children are probably like enthralled with the stories that you're telling. So you have to, like, listeners, go listen to some of her storytelling stories that she has on Instagram and TikTok. They're really good, and it'll give you some really good ideas. So, okay. Is there a difference between storytelling and story acting?
Yes, there is. So Vivian's big philosophy was that there was like 3 things that would happen a child would tell a story to an adult, and the adult would dictate it and like write it down and scribe it exactly as the child told it.
Okay.
And that was the storytelling piece. And then one thing she said that always resonated with me and I really held on to was like, a day cannot end without every story that's been told being acted out. So she then would provide an opportunity, and sometimes it would be in that moment when the story was told, or it would be later in the day or whenever it was. And then the children would actually act out the story. So that's what the story acting piece is.
Okay.
Yeah. So the idea would be children have the opportunity, if they want, to tell a story, and teachers can navigate that, or people at home, wherever, you can navigate that in whatever way makes sense for you, that it feels manageable. You may not want to take 20 stories, one from each child in your class, because then you would be really honoring them by acting out all 20 stories. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I forgot that a child had told me her story. And when it was story acting time, I was like, okay, so we don't have any stories to act out. So I just told a story and I let them act it out. And then later that day, I like saw it and I was like, I felt so bad. Like the first thing I said to her the next day was like, I'm so sorry I let you go home without us acting out your story. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So storytelling in the way that Vivian teaches it, storytelling is the children telling the adult a story and the adult dictating it. And then story acting is the piece where the children, you read the story out loud and then the children act it out.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So we did this in the program that I founded. And every child has their own journal, and they have a picture, and the journal is like an 80-page, like, I don't know, 9x6 size notebook, spiral bound. And they have their picture on the front of it. And then when they use it for many things, but one of the things that we did encourage is them to grab a teacher and say, I have a story that I want to tell. And then we would dictate it. We never did the story acting piece though. So now I would be really interested just to see how that would go. We would read them out loud sometimes, but not act them out.
Right. Because I mean, how often, all the time, kids are like, come see what I'm doing. Like innately their play, they are telling stories, right? Like they're acting out some story in their mind. Yes. And so it's there, right? But you almost need to like tease it out. So it's always interesting to see how children initially respond when you say like, do you want to tell me a story? A lot of them will just freeze up and like have no idea what you mean. Some will just be like, once upon a time, and you can tell the word tell me a story means something that they are exposed to and familiar with. And it's a range in between, which is why through the program that the program and the way that I was trained was that an additional part to it was adults modeling storytelling, so that it was then creating this really rich environment where they were hearing stories from a variety of people and that were told in a variety of ways, not just them telling stories. So it was to give them some inspiration.
Okay. So the things that I've seen on your Instagram are like you doing more of the storytelling. Is that okay? So what's the difference?
So the reason you'll find on my Instagram me telling stories is because I'm honoring the children and I'm not putting their stories really, or their acting on social media. Exactly. So what I will share is like, I just recently did a few reels and I'm playing around with that, is just the organic way that a story may come about. So you may start to see sometimes like just the script, like the words of it. You might see some pieces of the kids on the stage acting it out. So literally when I'm saying a stage, we just use masking tape on the rug. And we create this like culture of like, this is the stage, and we're in the audience off the stage, and this is the stage when they're acting it out. It's that fine line between like, I would love to share more in ways that I could of what the children are actually bringing to it, but it's not as easy in that way. So so you'll sometimes see their stories and maybe pieces of how they're acting it out. Or recently, my afternoon group has been instead actually just telling stories about what they are doing during their play. So it was like, I'm getting the red paint and I'm mixing it with the paintbrush, and now I'm putting it on the paper, literally narrating what her play was. And then we acted it out later. And like, she was her, and another kid was the paper, and another kid was the paintbrush. And they just like pretended to be, inanimate. Yeah, they can totally be inanimate objects. They can be animals. They can be each other. It gets really fun when they realize that they can put other children that they know in their stories, and they start to then act out as each other. Can be really cool to see.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so sweet. Like, I wish I could be a fly on the wall. I mean, we do get to see pieces of it. It's fascinating to me anyway, but to be able to see the children come up with those things and just the progression over time. Because even when we did story, like when they would tell us stories, it was so fun to go back and look. Like my little guy, he was in preschool for 3 years. And so his stories started out as like, the dog ran, the end. And then they would get much more in depth and full of like descriptive words. And there was like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it was really cool to see that progression over time. Do you get to, like, and if do you have your students for more than 1 year, or do you only have them for 1 year?
So in my previous position, I only had all my students for 1 year. Now I'm in a pre-K where some of mine will, they'll roll over and they'll be with me.
Yeah.
And even still, like, I would literally day one, like I would tell a story, especially with my kindergartners. And I'd be like, anybody want to tell me a story? So some children were telling stories in September through June. And I would keep them all in a binder for each child. And just, seeing that over the year, it's like a portfolio, right? And you're seeing so much evidence of their learning through just their stories that they were telling from A to B.
Okay. So when you start off the school year, so if you run like on a typical school year, do you start off being like making more time for you to tell stories to the children, just so they get an idea of what it's like, what it sounds like and what it looks like and the nuances of it, like the beginning, the middle, the end? Or do you just let it naturally occur?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell stories, and like in my previous positions, I set a goal to tell a story like 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
This year, for the children that I have, I'm just telling stories daily. It's just what's working for me and for them. And I would still, from the get-go, whenever I, as the person that's facilitating and felt ready to, I would just ask for stories. And so maybe for some of them, it's a list and they're just like dog, cat, airplane.
Yep.
Maybe it's one word, fire. And maybe it's literally retelling of the PJ Masks episode they watched last night.
Yes, that happened. Yes.
So, I just let it be organic, whatever it is, because although I'm modeling stories to inspire them and to help them maybe hear some transitional words or other ways they could end a story or how there might be a climax, I'm never going to tell them how their story has to be written or changed. And I'm never going to judge it and say, this is a better story than last week. Right. So I'm just telling stories as often as I can. And same with them, whatever I'm able to juggle based on the number of kids. I feel like the sweet spot is like normally like 3 to 4 stories per day. And, just let them, if they want, and they can pass, and they can not, they might never tell a story. They might never act out a story, and they might never tell a story, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a huge piece of like the play-based learning environment, where they're never forced to do something, because then that's not intrinsic. It's not self-chosen. So therefore it's not play. So like in a play-based learning environment, how okay, so there's a couple of different questions here. We also know that reading a book, like a picture book with children, is very important as well. How do you balance like story time, like with the traditional read aloud book, with storytelling from the teacher, with storytelling from the children?
Yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, storytelling from the adult can happen at any time. A transition, a meal, when you're outside, like with 3 kids, like, oh, did I ever tell you this one time that I came across an ant and whatever it might be. It could also be more formal where it's a time where you're gathered on the rug and you start telling a story and other kids come join. So I feel like, and a lot of my stories, especially right now, are like 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes max.
Okay.
Like a minute, like they can be quick. Because
nice.
what I'm looking for them as well, like I have a, wide ruled notebook that's, 8 by 12, and I'm skipping every other line when I'm writing their words. So their stories I'm expecting to be short as well. I mean, and there are the occasional stories, like if I tell, the 3 Billy Goats Gruff or the Little Red Hen, like some of those folk tales that just have more pieces, you could tell at different times. But really, the storytelling, I feel like you can fit in as a teacher in any way. And so that shouldn't overlap or take over, a book. What you could also do a lot of the times is like, there are some books that lend themselves to be acted out. So like We're Going on a Bear Hunt is a perfect book to read. And then or later you could act it out. Or even even Brown Bear, like they just can come on and be the animals. So you can really tie in the story acting and help them see that like books are also a story. They're just not an oral story.
Yeah.
And then the kids telling stories, that's as well. Like I find for me, I usually take them during when kids are kind of coming in, because it's that time. Some of them are eating, some of them are playing, some of them are just like in the calming corner, missing their family. Like, and I'll just walk around my notebook and be like, oh, did you want to tell a story today? You could, you can find times that feel good for you of when you want to take it. And it for me, it's best when it's a one-on-one personal thing, because it's undivided attention for that child. You're modeling so many things as you're writing it down, and you're intently listening to whatever it is they have to say.
Yeah. What advice would you give to an early childhood educator that is finding themselves in a spot where they believe in play and they want that play-based learning piece in their program? However, they are maybe in a more traditional program where there's certain like expectations they have to meet, and routines and schedules and teacher directed activities. So if they have a more rigorous schedule, I hate that. I don't want them to have a rigorous schedule, but if that's the case, and if there's a listener who's in that space, what are some tips that you could give them? Because they're going to immediately be like, I don't have time. Like I am leading this, that, and the other thing. I don't have time to listen to children tell stories. Like, how could you fit it in?
Okay. So, I mean, when I taught kindergarten in Boston, I mean, in reality, it was rigorous. I mean, there was at least an hour of uninterrupted play. Amazing. Where the kids were really choosing what they were doing. And I was facilitating their project-based learning that way. And we also had, a writer's workshop time. We also had a time where they were doing some literacy centers. We had a lot of other times of day, right? Yeah. So I was there, and my mentor always said to me, like, you just put it on your schedule, right? Like the first thing is you put specifically the story acting on your schedule.
Okay.
And in reality, like 5 minutes, maybe one time or two, it will get up to 10 minutes. But it's really going to be 5 minutes of them acting out. Like the first few times that there's the buildup of it, there's the excitement, there's laying down the tape. But once you work out the kinks and you figured it out, you're going to just gather as you do, and you're going to read 3 or 4 stories, and the kids are going to act them out. And as far as when you're taking the children's stories, again, it can be it can be in a writer's workshop time. This is still writing. It's so many writing skills are happening in that. It can be in a literacy station center, you know, where you're like, okay, today I'm going to be there. Or I don't know. I mean, I imagine some people have the technology to be able to just be like, if you needed to, like, hit record and tell your story in the iPad, whatever. And then maybe you scribe it later, or you don't, and you just press play and they act it out. I mean, there's got to be ways to do that. I think there you're missing out on pieces. Yeah. And you can find what works for you, right? I think with many things as teachers, it's really easy to say, no, I don't have time for that, or no, I can't make that work, or I don't know how to do that, or whatever the barrier may be. It's really easy to find a barrier. Yeah. Right. So it's, you just have to just get over that. And actually, if you go to my Instagram, in my bio, I have a link tree. And one of the freebies that I have is like a planning template that helps you break down some of those barriers. Ooh, like, what are the barriers that you, like, when I say, you know, take 10 minutes a day to take stories and act them out. Like, what are all the no's that you immediately are thinking, you know, and what can you do to get around it? And then I also have just like a little like cheat sheet, a 1 page that says like a kind of how to, like, if you wanted to implement this tomorrow, how could you do it? Where would you start? Yeah.
Oh, amazing. That's an excellent resource.
And the other thing that in a classroom like that, where you have, I imagine, many children and a lot of roles and things, I always found having a list. And so whether it was, I had a list on the wall or in my notebook, and I just rotated through and I went 3 kids a day, 3 kids a day, 3 kids a day. Or sometimes I was like organized enough one year, like the same 4 kids told stories on Mondays, or that was their day. And the same kids told it on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. And so they knew, like, oh, it's Friday, it's my storytelling day. And like, find a system that works for you. And so that the children know when their time is going to come. And even if you can only take 1 story a day, fine. They get to still tell a story once a month if you have 20 kids. Yeah. So you just have to say yes.
Yes. And be a little creative.
Yeah, exactly. And I can, shoot me a DM, reach out to me. I can give you lots of tricks because I've made it work in a variety of settings.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Okay. So like, I know, because I'm maybe one of them, that it's a lot easier to read a book than it is to like come up with a story from scratch. So do you have any like tips or tricks to help people in that situation where they're just like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to start. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest tip is like, just do it and do it regularly, because it really is like a muscle. It's a creative muscle that you just have to work and just start. And the places to start can totally be telling stories that, like I said, folk tales or fables, telling stories from your life, personal narratives. Yes. And you can start to fudge on them, right? Like, kids aren't going to know if it's like truthful. Plus, you may choose like, this story doesn't sound as exciting. Let me make it more exciting. Yeah. Or you can tell a super mundane story and let them know, like, hey, you could just tell me a story about, like, I went home after work yesterday. I sat down, I had dinner with my family. I was so tired and I went to bed. Like, you can tell a story like that. It can, I think it's easy in our mind to think it has to be this thing, and it doesn't. Like, it's just a moment in time where you're just like engaging. And in storytelling, right, you're like changing your voice, just like with books, you're changing your voice. You're like drawing their attention in. You're like, and you can even be like, and what do you think is going to happen? That's right, they did. Like, you can just interject things like that. So that's like my biggest advice, is just start doing it. Yeah. The second thing is, I often will tell stories that I've read, like, as an adult. So like, I think I told you this once before, like, one of my defaults for my son, because I tell him stories every night as well, is to like tell the story of Dobby the elf in like different ways that he needs like a sock.
Oh, like, so I just
pieces of Harry Potter, and I just will like tell it. Right?
It's like Laura fan fiction.
Exactly, right? Like you like Star Wars, you like whatever, Anne of Green Gables, like whatever TV show you're watching, like you can retell that to your children. Like you can do that. So there's that. And I also have a freebie if you want like just something to like you said, just like you don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And it's just like something you print out and put on a key ring and flip through. And they're just like, some of them are narratives and it's like, it was so scary the time that, or like it was, I was really embarrassed one day when, so it's just giving you like a story starter.
Yeah.
And then some of them are like characters. Like I think one of them was like a bubble that, wants to make friends with something, but is scared of heights. Like, I don't know. I just gave you some like really random thing.
Yeah.
To just like throw together because I think that innately early childhood educators, we are comedians. We are, we're always on the spot. Like we do have that ability to orally captivate people. We sing, even if we sing horribly, right? Like we do all the things to engage the children. So just assume you're going to be just as good as a storyteller once you start doing it.
Oh, I love that advice. You will be.
Yeah.
Aw. No, I want to like tell my kid a story before bed tonight.
Totally. I mean, and if you're like totally frozen, like I try to post in my stories every day, either the story I told my son or one of my classes. So listen to my story and then tell it the next day. Like whatever.
Totally. I have one of my best memories from teaching in my program when I was a teacher in the program was when one day I was like, we were all outside and we have a big stage outside in our outdoor classroom and we were all sitting there and something had happened. I don't know what, but I was stalling and there was a huge water tower across the road. And I all of a sudden just started making up this story about these mermaids that live in the water tower across the road. And it like morphed into this huge thing. And it became part of like the culture of our classroom. And the story was handed down over the years. So even though that was like 7 years ago, some of the kids, like having siblings in the program, know about the mermaids in the water tower. So that's what the power of storytelling is. It's so powerful and it brings brings groups together and it's beautiful.
Yes, so, that's absolutely what it is, right? Like it is this community building experience between the children that are all there and they're experiencing it together. And so even right now, like I only started, I think I want to say in like December or January, like really telling a lot more stories to my students. And there's a couple that they ask for certain ones. Like they're like, can you tell me the shark story? Which was like a 1-minute story I just told. Or like I told a story about the kids one day coming into the classroom and all the lights were off and me and my TA were home sleeping. And like this one student asks for it like almost every day. He's like, tell the story when I came in and the lights were off.
Oh, how fun is that?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay. I think I got most of my questions answered. Is there anything else that you think is important that you want to add?
I mean, I think that if this hasn't sold you enough on why you should maybe try it out, and you're a little bit more hesitant and the benefits that you've heard don't sound well enough, I want you to think about this. The power of vocabulary development that could be happening, just the oral language and the sentence structure that they're using and you're modeling when you're writing their stories, how many concepts of print they're starting to notice, whether it's just like you wrote my name at the top or like, what does that say? Or they start noticing letters, whatever
top
it might
bottom,
be.
left to right.
Exactly. So many things of that. And you're building, naturally you're building their creativity or you're appreciating it. You're bringing it to a space. And there's so many social emotional things that are happening as well. when it's the story acting. So there's
Yeah.
so much like self-regulation, right?
Yeah.
You have to use. Like one of the things. So I think also if you need to start, The Boy Who Would Be a Helicopter by Vivian Paley is like
Okay, that was the other thing I was going to ask
the
you.
book
What
you
would
should
be your
read.
number one
Yeah.
go-to resource?
Yes. So it would definitely be a lot of Paley's books, but I would start with The Boy Who Would Be a Helicopter.
Okay.
And there's also a book written by like one of Vivian Paley's, like I would call her basically a protege. And she's a woman that I worked with that's actually in the UK. And she has this whole like thing out in the UK. But this one's called Princesses, Dragons, and Helicopter Stories.
Ooh.
And it's written by Trisha Lee. And so that's like a really like how to implement it.
What was the name of that one? Princesses?
Yep, so Dragons and Helicopter Stories.
Okay.
And so she uses the term helicopter stories because I believe, I may be misspeaking, but I think what I remember is when you're story acting, nobody gets to pick their role. So let's say it's a story about, you know, a bunch of animals. The author of the story can choose to be the jaguar, but nobody else gets to choose. So otherwise, you're literally just pointing around the circle. So as a character comes up, do you want to be the lion? You can choose yes or no, right? Do you want to be the monkey? You can choose yes or no. And then they're coming right on. And so you're kind of going around the circle in that way to invite children to come onto the stage, which is where I think she got the concept of helicopter stories.
Okay.
But so in that moment, children are having to wait. They're having to, they're having to, know that they're in the audience versus on the stage. They're having to actively listen. If they're the lion, they need to know what the lion's going to do.
Yeah.
And they have to like negotiate. There might not be a lot of space on the stage, or if they're the lion and the jaguar is supposed to chase them, they might turn around and be like, "You're supposed to chase me." So many things can be unfolding that, just like there's so many reasons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in my brain, I'm thinking like you just meet like every single domain of early learning. You meet cognitive and language and literacy and physical development and social and emotional, like all of them.
Exactly. And the really powerful thing that I've seen a lot, work a lot with a lot of multi-language learners, is it's so much total physical response happening. And it's like, the bear is climbing. And even if just one character's climbing and it's the bear, you might say like, we can all climb too. And now you're modeling it. And a child that maybe hasn't heard that word before is seeing all these people climb and they're climbing too.
Yeah.
Or, snuck away, just like vocabulary that may just come out. They're actually seeing it acted out, or they're acting it out themselves. So it's that total physical response. And they're really then taking in new vocabulary in a different way. That's a lot more powerful.
Another thing that I think is really, really neat and important to note that I'm just kind of realizing right now is that through storytelling and story acting, when it's the children's stories, they are able to bring in their own experiences and their own families and their own culture and their own traditions into the classroom organically. And that is so important when it comes to the BIPOC community and the LGBTQ community. And I think that's powerful.
Absolutely.
To know that they're all represented in their own way.
Right. And as their educator, you can be mindful. Maybe, something really significant was happening in this child's, family over the weekend, and you could be sure to take their story on Monday. And you're not nudging and you're not saying, tell me a story about your weekend, but you're providing that opportunity right after. And you will find, there are children that will always tell a story about their family, right?
Yep.
And the kids and the baby and the this and the mom does this. There are always kids that will tell a story about getting ready and coming to school. Like,
yep.
It's all the steps of their routine.
There's always one that will say their mom is having a baby. And then you're like, is your mom having a baby?
There's always one that will tell the shows or the Batmans or, those characters. And there's always ones that will want to tell about princesses and unicorns. Yep. And then there are some that just like will blow your mind. There was one, and I remember this boy and I have his story saved and like, he's going to go somewhere. It was about a pair of pants walking around with no body in it.
Oh.
And he told it like over multiple weeks.
Wow.
Like the main character was like a pair of pants. It was just like genius.
That reminds me of a story. So there's a story, the little old lady who wasn't afraid of anything. And there's like a pair of pants in that story that walks around. You wonder
maybe
if
they were reading it at home the night before.
Maybe. Oh my gosh. That's the sweetest.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Okay. So tell everybody where they can find you again.
Okay. So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and I think even Twitter, even though I'm not on there actively.
I don't know
all the things at little.stories.that.stick.
Okay. And then is your link tree just on Instagram or is it everywhere else too?
It is, but maybe we'll explore sharing that in other places. So yeah, so you can go to my link tree and find those couple things to help you tell stories on your own.
Yeah.
Start implementing it in your classroom, as well as you could just sign up to join, my newsletter where I may give you access to longer stories that are on my YouTube channel. Some of the stories that like I fell in love with from my mentors telling me them. And just other, tips and tricks and things that are coming along the way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I learned a lot. And now I wish that I had a classroom that I could go back to, but I'm going to use it with my own child tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can absolutely, I always encourage families to, sometimes I would send the stories home and now you could just take a photo of it and text it. Like, your child told this story today, like act it out. And if there are 3 people in the family, like you can totally act it out.
That is really neat.
Yeah. And you just get together and you're like, oh, and you read it and then that's it. I mean, you could do it anywhere, outside, inside, in a bedroom,
Yeah. Wonderful.
Wherever. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Shea.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, you did.
Shea. All right. We'll see you later, Laura.
All right.
Hey, I need you to do me a huge favor. If you liked listening and you want to be able to hear more, can you please go onto iTunes and leave me a 5-star review? I would so appreciate it. And then connect with me on Instagram. It's learning.wild. We'll see you around.